Whatever living beings there may be, without exception, weak or strong, long, large, medium, short, subtle or gross, visible or invisible, living near or far, born or coming to birth, may all beings have happy minds. Let no one deceive another, nor despise anyone anywhere. Neither from anger nor ill will should anyone wish harm to another. As a mother would risk her own life to protect her only child, even so towards all living beings, one should cultivate a boundless heart. One should cultivate for all the world a heart of boundless loving friendliness, above, below, and all around, unobstructed, without hate or resentment, whether standing, walking, sitting, lying down, or whenever awake. One should develop this mindfulness. This is called divinely dwelling here, not falling into erroneous views, but virtuous and endowed with vision, removing desires for sensual pleasures. One comes never again to birth in the womb. With this metta thought, let us continue our meditation. As usual, pay total, undivided, mindful attention to your breathing. Noticing inhaling as inhaling, exhaling as exhaling. When you inhale, you notice the breath touching your nostrils, expanding chest area, and then expanding the lower abdominal area. When we breathe out, you notice the contraction of abdominal area, chest area, and the breath leaving your nostrils. These functions invariably take place as we breathe in and out. Also, you notice the feeling, perceptions, thoughts, consciousness rise and fall while we are breathing in and out. As they rise and fall, none of them stay the same, even for 2 consecutive moments. They keep changing, appearing and disappearing. When you notice that any desire to hold on to anything, how pleasant it is you will see is a futile effort. It doesn't hold. Always things change. That way you let go of greed, at least during this practice, meditation. And then as everything is changing, disappearing, there's nothing to hold on to, greed disappears. That time your body relaxes, mind relaxes, the breath relaxes. In this relaxed state of mind, body and breath, you experience the feeling of metta, loving friendliness. When loving friendliness arises, all rigidity, uptightness, resentment fades away. When they fade away, metta feeling becomes stronger. Then arises compassion, karuna. When compassion arises, your mind will no longer be restless and agitated. Restlessness and worry fading away. The mind becomes even more relaxed, calm and peaceful. And then you notice your sleepiness and drowsiness fade away. When energy arises in you, energy means that you get encouragement to continue your practice because you see some benefits, and then you get even more encouraged to continue. And then sleepiness and drowsiness fade away. Seeing all these things, confidence arises in you. The confidence that you can practice, you gain very wholesome, beneficial results, and that gives you confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha and your own practice. With this confidence, when confidence arises, your mind is filled with joy. Joy increases by degree, and then it makes the body, mind peaceful, relaxed, tranquil. In that tranquil state of mind leads to happiness. Passaddhi leads to happiness. Happy state of mind becomes even more calm, more peaceful. Then you gain concentration. Buddha said invariably that when concentration arises, that concentrated mind can see things as they really are. Samahitang chittang yatha bhutang pajanati, said the Buddha. Concentrated mind sees things exactly as they are. Things here means body, feelings, perceptions, thought and consciousness, the five aggregate. These are the things that concentrated mind can see. Concentrated mind can see them, the aggregates, as they really are. They really are in a state of flux, changing, impermanent, rising and falling. That is what the concentrated mind can see. When the mind is concentrated, you notice that concentrated mind can notice the subtlest, minutest changes taking place in these five aggregates. With this, you will gain deeper insight into the further reality, that is, that there is no permanent self. Permanent self is just a mere notion. In reality, it does not exist. This non-existence of permanent self becomes very conspicuous in the mind when the mind sees everything is changing in the minutest form. And that way we become even more relaxed, more peaceful and calm. Let us try to gain that experience following these instructions. Dukkha pattaca nidukkha bhaya pattaca nibhaya soka pattaca nisoka hontu sabbe pipanino. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. So too may all beings be. Keeping this metta thought in mind, try to understand the answers to these questions that people have asked. There are few questions. One is Samude Dhammanupasiva Kasming Viharati. Could you please explain this briefly with an example? That is, I hear Sotra Vijnana, a fan while my eyes are closed. How do I know that there is fan? Dhammanupasi Vakasmirati. Dhamma is mind object. You know mind object. When it arises in your mind, that becomes your mind object. You mention an example of fan. If you remember fan, that very instant the image of fan arises in your mind. Now, it arises in your mind as a phenomenon. That is your recall the memory of the fan. That memory of the fan at that moment is not materialized in your mind, but you remember it remember existing it outside, and now you remember the sound of the fan, color of the fan, the speed of the fan, and the air that fan moves. All these you remember, you recall. Now, none of them is you can see. uh, Even if you open your eyes, you can see only the color, shape of the fan, but you cannot see the air that moves. Only the body feels that. But bodily feeling of the air movement now appears in the mind. Now, all these are becomes mental objects. That is how the very fan, so material, so tangible and visible. Now, when you close your eyes, they appear in your mind as objects. Sound you have heard somewhere. you have heard this sound when the sound was being made. When you are no longer there, you cannot hear the sound, but you remember the sound. For instance, somebody, uh, somebody shouting or shooting or singing or talking, whatever sound that you have heard sometimes ago, long, long ago, are no longer there. But the memory is there, memory of that particular sound, its intensity, its strength and coarseness, softness, sweetness, roughness of that sound, you can recall. When you heard the sound when it was done, that time you heard it. But later on, from a far away, distant place, you cannot hear the sound, and still the memory is there. Everything that registered at that time, your mind recalls. That is how that the sound becomes a mind object. Anything, taste, smell, touch, and all these experiences we have had in the past through our senses, when the moment passed, remain in your mind as mind object. When you recall, they appear. However, after lapse of long period of time, some of the memories wipes out. You cannot recall them. And that is the nature of the Dhamma. And at the same time you understand that Dhamma, the phenomenon that you experienced, was impermanent, is impermanent, will be impermanent in future. Once you understood or comprehended, realized by yourself the impermanence, and that would be the same impermanence. It will not change. Impermanence is impermanence, whether it is past, present, or future. And therefore, Dhamma is in the stanza Buddha said, recited the Sabbe Dhamma Anatta, meaning that all Dhammas, phenomena that come into existence, come into existence through causes and conditions, and therefore there is no one single central point or mover to move this phenomenon. Because of the causes and conditions they arise, when the causes and conditions disappear, they disappear. I think this may be enough for that answer to that question. There is another question referring to my talk. Yesterday you spoke of Vedana, like Buddhas in the Vedana like bubbles in a pond when the rain falls. Thank you, Bhante, that was so helpful. You also spoke of 108 feelings, and they are described as 36 in the present, future, and past. Now, yes, I mentioned there are 108 kinds of feelings mentioned in Bahuvedaniya Sutta in Madhyama Nikaya. You experience, you have feelings arising through your senses, uh, Chakku Sampasaja Vedana, Sota Sampasaja Vedana, and so forth. The feeling arising through the eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, and mind contact. Feeling arises. And these six kind of feelings uh, divided into two, samisa, niramisa. The six kind of feelings, uh, first three kinds of feeling divided into, multiply by two, samisa, niramisa. And these three kinds of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, samisa, niramisa. And then that you use these six to multiply the six kind of feelings that you get through your senses. Then you have 36. And these 36 you multiply by again by 3, past, present, and future. Now, your question is, this is how 108 feelings arise. You have another question. Could you please elaborate on this, please, Bhante? I am confused about whether these feelings are from mental contact with memory, the past, or fantasy about the future, in which case it seems to be taking place in the present. Or does it literally mean literally mean feelings which could took place in the past, feeling taking place in the present, and the feeling to take place in the future? This is another good question. When you have a feeling, you experience the feeling and pay attention to the feelings, and you see that particular feeling that you are experiencing now is changing. The You have to very attentively focus your mind on the feeling with the concentrated mind, pay attention to your feeling. Then you will notice that feeling is changing, impermanent. Then you experience feeling few minutes later, particular feeling, and watch carefully, mindfully, then that feeling changes. You keep watching feelings whenever it arises. Whenever it arises, you watch it, and you notice that it is changing. Then you remember the feelings you had in the morning in one day. And now you try to recall it in the at noon or in the evening, and try to remember the feeling you had in the morning. And you certainly will notice the feeling you had in the morning is no longer there in the evening. For instance, when you open your eyes, you wake up in the morning. When you wake up in the morning, you have certain feelings. You feel sleepy, you feel the touch of the bed, you feel trying to get up, and so many little feelings you have had in the morning. Now, when you try to remember them, you remember those feelings as they arose, they passed away. And those feelings you don't have now in the evening. and then you get up, wash yourself up and have water, whatever you do. Every moment you have certain feelings you had in the morning, and those feelings are no longer in the evening. And so forth, whenever the feeling arose, that feeling at that very moment begins to change. Dependent origination is a very powerful teaching. When the moment certain things come together, certain things happen, when those things pass away, that thing that arose also pass away. For instance, in the morning, when you get up, you have had if you had a good sleep, you have one feeling. If you didn't have good sleep, another feeling. If you didn't have any aches and pains in the body due to air movement, due to the fact that you want to go to the bathroom, there were certain feelings. All these feelings, as they arise, there are certain conditions, and due to those conditions, those feelings arose. When those conditions disappeared, those feelings also disappeared. That is how it is happening this moment, and a moment before that, 10 minutes before that, a week before that, year before that, and so forth. So many you can trace back to you as far as you can remember. Then you notice that all those feelings you had in the past are no longer there with you now. Sometimes some feelings like suppose you have a traumatic experience. Somebody hurt you, somebody did something very damaging to your life. Those things registered in your mind very deeply, and you recall them. And then whatever arises along with that, hatred or greed or jealousy or fear, also will arise in your mind, but not in the same intensity, not in the same way, but you, because of your memory, you have some of those feelings in you. And even those feelings every time arise in your mind now, even though they have happened so many years ago, you may have some residues of those feelings, you may have, but each time they arise in your mind, that feelings does not arise with the same intensity. And so you can see the past feeling changed just like the present feeling is changing. So that is what we have to understand with regard to feeling. Anything, any experience we have has the same nature, same changing nature, same impermanent nature. That's what we have to understand. There is another question, little complicated question. Somebody wrote a very long description of paying attention to the sound or the breath and the pause between inhaling and exhaling. And in all these places, the consciousness arose, and that consciousness is either fragmented or the consciousness is continuing as a one single object, and so forth. Long description of the personal experience. I don't want to read that letter again. Now, I must say once again, in my yesterday's explanation, I mentioned consciousness arises so quickly and disappears so quickly you cannot isolate it. Uh, because any tiny little movement, no matter how small it is, if if you are awake, if you are not uh, in deep sleep or coma or something, you will have consciousness. Anytime, anything that happens, noticeable, consciousness arises at that time. So you cannot isolate consciousness from everything else because it arises along with that, along with something that is noticeable. Uh, for instance, if I were to give you an example, you will be really shocked how quickly consciousness arises and passes away. Suppose in your meditation, this naturally happens. In your meditation, uh, suppose you experience certain feelings, certain perceptions, certain thoughts, certain memories, certain ideas, certain food, certain many countless things appear in your mind. Uh, they arise so quickly and pass away. At the same speed, consciousness arises and passes away. Whether it is a sound, a smell, taste, touch, or whatever, and you will notice the feeling, perception, the memories, and so forth. All sort of things happening to the mind during your meditation. You are your consciousness arises along with each and every one of them. Each and every one of them. Just remember, you remember thousands of things appear in your mind in a flash of light, very very quickly, and consciousness arises along with all of them at the same time. As they vanish, consciousness also vanish from those things. Therefore, you cannot in any situation isolate consciousness. Uh, I mentioned yesterday, Buddha said, Mayupamacha Vijnana, consciousness compared to magic. You know, the magicians, so they move things so quickly, do things so quickly, and before you blink your eyes, something else happens. Now, there is no any essence, no essence. But at that moment, when this very quick change take place, you are tricked to visualize in your mind certain things. But that certain thing actually is not in the magic trick. Say, for instance, a pigeon. A magician will show you a pigeon. Magician will show you various things and open his hands and so forth. Uh, there is nothing in there. But he uh, bring the pigeon from his hidden pocket so quickly that you think that he created the pigeon. Uh, in reality, he did not create. He brought the pigeon. Now, the notion of creation in your mind arises so quickly because of his quick movements and movements, his hands and sticks and and so forth and so on. So the consciousness is arising so fast that you cannot put your finger on any particular moment of consciousness because it is so quick. Therefore, you people say when they breathe in and breathe out, when inhaling complete, there is a brief pause, and then exhaling begins. And during this pause, one can become conscious of this brief pause. You cannot hold that your consciousness on that pause because the pause itself is very quick. The consciousness is much quicker than the pause. You cannot hold your consciousness on the pause. Consciousness is arising and passing away very rapidly. Every moment you are aware, consciousness is there. It doesn't take too long to arise and pass away. However, consciousness does not arise on itself, by itself, on its own. Uh, Consciousness always arises with something. That is why it is even that is more the reason to make it so difficult to understand. When it arises by itself, it is easy to understand, but it arises along with something. For instance, when we say I consciousness does not exist or arise by through the I alone. There has to be an object, and as soon as object arises, consciousness arises. When the object disappears, consciousness of that particular object also disappears. So by opening your eyes, you are conscious of opening eyes. It happens so quickly, but it becomes really active when the object is present. So I arises with the consciousness, object arises with the consciousness. You remember in our discussion on dependent origination, mentality factor and materiality factor, both of them get their vitality, their strength from consciousness. Consciousness moves from one object to the next along with the power of that object. For instance, in the mentality group we have phassa. Phassa means contact. Contact does not arise does not arise by itself. It arises with consciousness. Consciousness does not arise without the contact. Then feeling, perceptions, thought, and then all these four factors plus attention, all these involve consciousness. So consciousness cannot arise by itself. None of those mental factors can operate, function without consciousness. They are so closely linked, closely connected, and therefore it is very easy for people. It is easy for people to talk about consciousness, but isolating consciousness from one particular object is virtually impossible, and it changes so quick. The Buddha said he even could not give an example. Could not give us an example to show the speed of the change of consciousness. Consciousness changes so quickly. Buddha said, "Upamapi na sukara." It is even not sukara. Na sukara means not easy. Even to give an example to show the speed of consciousness is not easy because it changes so quickly. And therefore, trying to isolate consciousness from everything else and focus on it is virtually impossible. Now, with these friends, I like to close this section, and when next Thursday I start the other section on Dhamma Anupasana, mindfulness of Dhamma. I hope you have Mahasatipatthana Sutta and you read it. That section is called the senses, sensory objects, and how fetters arise through them. That is the next topic of my next discussion on Thursday. Now I want to end this morning session wishing all our sick people to be free from sickness and recover from sickness very quickly and continue their regular life. And others, doctors, nurses, and hospital staffs who are trying to help these people to recover, may they be successful without getting themselves affected by the virus, and may they live long in good health to continue their marvelous service. And there are some others who are still grieving the death of their loved ones. Some of them are our friends. May they relieve from this grief, recover from this, and return to normal health, continue their life in good health to attain liberation. And there are world leaders and some generous people who are supporting various projects. May they continue their generous support and live long in good health to continue their work. Some leaders who have done some wonderful, marvelous service to contain this virus, and some of them have been successful, and I hope they continue their service until the virus is totally wiped out from the world. There are some other leaders also, they need more understanding, patience, courage, determination, and wisdom to make right decision to help them recover faster. And with this very earnest metta wish, I like to conclude this morning's session. Thank you for participating and encouraging.